today.
We are live. I don't even have the app, so I should probably get that.
You're just recording in browser?
I'm just in browser mode, probably opening myself up to all kinds of glitches and issues, but...
You've been sounding good. Keep doing what's working.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, or whatever
That's
they
it.
say.
That's what I always say.
Yeah, that's the one, is you're coming through loud and clear audio-wise. So
Okay.
That's good. Troubleshoot in real time.
Yeah, I'm just slowly turning up the volume, so...
Yeah, no, you sound good.
Cool.
It's working.
A whole part of my audio device just stopped working. This is a cloud lifter. And it turns out you don't really need it. It's supposed to boost the audio from the mic before it gets into the mixer, and it crapped out on me. So
You lost me at mixer. This is my whole audio setup.
That's the right
here.
I laughed about it in episode 1. I think it's the right move, to be honest.
I just needed something that I could just plug in and just set it and forget it. Because like you sound good, your camera looks way better than mine does, but I feel like I'd get lost in there. This is my it's the Apple Studio display monitor. Shout out Apple, another potential sponsor for the show. We'll see.
If you're listening, Apple, Tim Cook.
Yeah, if you listened to the last episode, you know that they probably are listening. So
yep, it was Meta that was the problem.
It was Meta. Apple's doing the same thing. Pay attention to us. We need those sponsorship dollars.
We just need someone to pay attention to us. Someone has to listen.
Honestly, I'm just feeling needy. I just want someone to listen. Just tell us we're doing a good job.
Oh, I love it. Hey, so we had an outline today, and I don't see it anymore. Did you just pull it?
No, it's still there. You want me to? I can Slack this to you. We're workshopping. We're workshopping here. Hang on, it's coming through.
It's okay. You can go. I'll just probe you with questions.
Yeah. Well, that works. I mean, so what I wanted to talk about today, I feel like we typically go like pretty, we're pretty high level. But I also kind of wanted to pivot this a little bit and go a little bit more granular and focused on my content world. So I wanted to talk about blog writing basics for co-working spaces. The reason why I think this is a relevant topic is because I nerd out all the time. I'm always checking out co-working blogs and things like that to see what people are doing, making assessments on what's maybe working, what's maybe not, what could be done better, things like that. I'm always just kind of taking an inventory. And I find that there's a lot of co-working spaces that have blogs, but not all of them are probably maybe as dialed as they could be. So I thought maybe take this opportunity to just go, as I said before to you offline, try not to go down too many rabbit holes here, because there's, if I look at my outline, there's probably 7 or 8 that we could go through.
Not including the tangents we go on.
Yeah, the tangents are like 80% of these episodes.
Yeah, a lot of tangents.
For our listener. But yeah, so I figured this is a good place to start. I actually have a course that I built like a couple of years ago and then updated recently that I can drop into the resources section here too. So we'll go high level on a few things, and then if anybody has, wants more detail, you can check out the course and the resources. And also I'll do a few callbacks here to past episodes with things that might be able to help you beef up your blog. But yeah, that's the course for today.
Cool. And just for context, so in case you're listening to this podcast and you don't know who Taylor and I are, Taylor does content with his agency Tailmaker. They do content marketing for co-working spaces. So this is definitely right in the center of your wheelhouse. And just wanted to get that out there in case you're coming to this like, who is this guy? This is what he does.
Yeah, if you're like most people wondering who this guy is, that is what I do. Yeah. I was laughing for the last episode because we covered ads, and I'm like, as a content guy, I had no perspective on ads, so I was listening to you and learning probably as much as anybody else. So I figured I should come on here and talk about something I actually know.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for it. So where do you want to start? So should we be still blogging in 2025? Is that a good place to start?
Yeah, I think that's a relevant question. I think like the answer is yes, but, and there's a couple of buts here. The first one is AI implications. Like if you listen to our episode, what episode was that? 5, I guess, that we did on AI. It was a few back, but one of the big things that we talked about in that episode is how AI has given everybody the opportunity to create like a really high volume of really questionable content, specifically for blogs. I think like most of work, like, for the everyday user of, say, ChatGPT, most of the content they're producing is blogs, and it's really it's really clear. If somebody's
You can
using
tell.
AI, it's like, it's very, like, if you have even like a slightly trained eye to it, you can pick up on it. And so like blogging is still relevant, yes, but with AI, it's kind of called into focus this need for quality and for strategy, and not just doing things to do things because it's easy to do it with AI. So I think that's the biggest caveat that I'd say here is yes, but focus on quality, focus on strategy. I always say for content marketers, my thing was like, this kind of AI and ChatGPT has been a call to action for us to step it up. You can either take the easy route or you can step it up. And if you want to be successful with content, especially with blogging, you got to step it up in terms of strategy and quality. So that's one of the things that we'll dive into, a little bit of strategy in this episode. But yeah, make sure that you're not just doing things because it's easy to do it, because you can just give it ChatGPT a prompt.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's always been true, and it's always been hard to create a blog that people want to read for co-working spaces in general, but even for any business, especially one where it's easier for us because we get to teach something for a living, and that's our form of content. But a lot of co-working operators are not really there to teach, although there's a role for education based content. So AI is really just extrapolating what might be bad strategy to begin with, or not knowing how to create content that people want to read. And that's, to me, the benchmark. Do I want to read this or not?
Yeah. And I have 11 unbreakable rules of crafting content, which we'll dive into in a little bit here. But I think it's interesting you say that. This is kind of verging on the strategy. And again, it's a rabbit hole I don't really want to go down, but content, especially blog content for co-working, is such an interesting world, because like, let's say if you were a SaaS business or like an e-commerce business that sold a singular product or a singular service or whatever it is, it's much easier to craft really focused content around that. You can really lean into SEO because your customers could be anywhere in the world. Co-working is quite different because you have, 4 or 5 different services, from co-working to private offices to enterprise sometimes. And then within each of those service categories, you have multiple different kinds of potential buyers. So trying to make focused content is a little bit more difficult than it would be for another industry or another world. So that also calls into play the need to really be dialed. But jumping around here, so I'll get to that.
Yeah,
in a
cool.
bit.
All right, so so you're saying yes, but for the blog in 2025. So what does it entail? Like why should you have it? And
there's a number of reasons, and this is very co-working specific. One is trust and credibility. I think for me, like, showing up on a co-working spaces blog, it's a community oriented business. It's an experience driven business in as much as it's also a workspace. If I pull up on a co-working spaces blog or a website and there's no blog, or there's no activity, or the blog is dead or hasn't been used much, to me, I kind of feel like, hey, is anybody home? So I think having a blog is a great way to, build some trust and credibility. Another thing that's important, though, is education. Like, I think you said this in the last episode. We were talking about how do you describe what you do for a living for people in co-working, and you said for you, it's like, you're saying, do you know WeWork?
Yeah, so WeWork, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the same thing, right? I think like being in co-working, we're also convinced that everybody understands exactly what it is and exactly what we do. But when you step back from that and you put yourself in the perspective of a professional or a business owner, they might not know exactly what you do. So your blog is a great way to educate them on that, on the benefits, on what exactly it is. So this all comes into your content mix, but education is a big component here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a big one. I always say an educated buyer is a happy buyer. So like, for people to, many people haven't bought office space before, or if they have, they bought it in a different, maybe traditional office or maybe executive suites, and you might be offering something different. So you have to kind of educate on the category of co-working or flex office, as well as the differentiators of your business.
Yeah. And that's one of the ones I had down there too, is differentiation and your niche, right? Like every co-working space is a little bit different. You can use your blog to put out signals as far as, if you're a space that's more tailored towards creatives and small business owners, or, corporations, enterprise organizations, things like that, you can use your blog to send those signals so that people can kind of self-qualify based on what they're seeing on your blog. And that kind of verges, I had a note here for self-serve information, right? Like most people today want to do their own research and do their own learning and equip themselves with information before making a purchase. And co-working is no different. So you can use your blog to educate people, choose your space, but it's self-serve information so that by the time somebody actually books a tour or, contacts you, then hopefully they've been able to do a little bit of independent research, get up to speed on the industry, on your space, and maybe you're a little bit more qualified before they get in the door.
Yep. Love it.
Yeah. And SEO. So this is an interesting one, and I'd actually be interested to hear your take on this. So I have a funny thing with SEO, blog content for co-working. Like I think it's great to get traffic on the website. However, as we talked about before, co-working spaces are generally, even if you're a multi-location operator, co-working spaces are generally pretty localized. So for me, I like to focus more on localized SEO, like for lack of a better example, co-working in X city or best co-working spaces in X city or, whatever it might be, rather than kind of going for bigger, broader keywords that bring traffic to your blog that, might be from any. Yeah. Like if you're in Maryland and you're getting, readers from Texas, then is it really what did it mean? That being said, I think localized SEO on your blog is a great thing to do. So that's another opportunity.
So what are some examples of that, and relating to your blog? Like what would be a topic or an article you do to help drive relevant traffic?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I had a client, they were a single location operator in Arizona, and we pivoted most of their blog strategy to like local events, local restaurant roundups, local like bike routes or things like that are kind of like peripheral to what they offer. Like they're part of the community. So we're not just focusing just on co-working, but we're focusing on establishing them as a presence or a resource in their local community. So things like that. And it ended up being, like a significant chunk. The traffic that came in through those blog articles was like a significant chunk of the traffic that the website got. And the win there is that, that nobody's looking for, bike routes in smaller Arizona market unless they're actually in that local market or visiting from somewhere. So those kind of things, it's not necessarily on the nose SEO about what you do. Sometimes it is, but it doesn't have to be. Sometimes it's about just making your space a presence in your local market and having people bump into you all the time so that, maybe they're talking to somebody later and go, oh, I read this article from this co-working space. If you're looking for an office, maybe check them out.
I mean, it also has other benefits too. I mean, if let's say, for example, you're ranking for the best, bike trails in that part of town or whatever, or that city, what it does, it gets you backlinks from other websites. And ideally Google does look for relevance. So if you got a bunch of backlinks from like, trail blogs, they may not be the most authoritative for your core services, but it's still better than nothing. And so like what happens is as you rank higher, you get more traffic. You can sometimes retarget those traffic with local ads to educate potential folks that in the industry or in the market, I guess, or even in the area that you exist. And then they may tell friends, or they may come in and book a meeting or one of the other ancillary services. But even just that general backlinks and website traffic, Google will notice, and I guess in the future AI will notice these signals that says a lot of people look at this site as an authoritative source locally. And so they may give you the benefit of the doubt with other service pages that you have, especially if you drop in links to those services pages and so on and so forth. It kind of passes some of that authority. There's more internal links pointing to those core service pages. So you kind of have this cumulative effect of external sites are referencing you, traffic is visiting you, you're tapping into the zeitgeist, people are becoming more aware of you, you're building awareness, which is a good long-term play for your brand. And then the benefits that benefit you with SEO will probably also benefit you with AI in the future as that becomes a bigger part of search.
Yeah, and I think I stole this saying from you years ago, but broadening the surface area of your business that applies to the localized SEO, but it also applies to just generally your blog. The more you can broaden the surface area of your business. And I think we talked about this again in the last episode, is all the touch points that, how many touch points do you need to make an impression on somebody?
Yeah. And so much happens from word of mouth as well. Like people hear about you, they think your space looks neat or cool. And then they tell their nephew, their cousin, their friend, their colleague, and so much happens. So if you plan to be in business for the next 10 or 15 years, how do you foster local content so you become authoritative, especially if you're in that market? If you're spread out, obviously it gets harder. There's economies of scale get more difficult to do that. You have to do more content in more places, less of those consolidation benefits. But yeah, if you play the long term, it's magic, right? Like you said, increase your surface area. I say play in traffic. You're going to get hit by some kind of good luck eventually. Maybe that's the wrong analogy.
That's my favorite analogy. If you play in traffic long enough, you're going to get hit by good luck.
Yeah, it's the good luck traffic, the good luck highway.
Take that to the bank.
Yeah, people don't like it, but I do think like 50% of marketing is just magic. And so when I say that to clients, they're like, great, so we're paying you for magic. And I'm like, yeah, partly. We're going to do a bunch of stuff, and some of it's just going to work like magic.
Yeah. Well, and the thing with blog content is that you see it over time. It's a slow burn, right? It's not like last episode we focused on ads, which is a very quick uptick. Blog content is a much slower burn, but you do see it over time that if you're doing it right, the graph just trends upwards. So, yeah. And another one that's more unique to co-working, I think, is shareability. This is kind of a big part of what we do content wise for people is you've got members in your space who have expertise. You can profile those people, showcase their expertise, provide value to members beyond just the membership. You're able to get, insights from real experts that other people can learn from. On the flip side of that coin, by doing that, you're also showing your members some love, making them feel a little bit more engaged. Like they're not just a member, they're actually like a valued resource and a valued person that you can put out there. And then that also conversely, it's an indicator to others of what kind of space you're in, who are they going to be around, what's that community like that they're going to be stepping into if they work at your space.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest parts of strategy, sorry if I interrupted a final thought there, is leverage. So how do you get your name and your brand name out there and your message and your concept? And so you think in terms of leverage. Ads might be one way to do that. Ranking you for various relevant local keywords another way. Someone that you feature on your blog who shares it to their network lends you some credibility, like you mentioned in your first point, and lends you some, and just generally builds awareness. So it's kind of like you're leveraging other people in their audience, and that may sound like transactional, and it's not the intent. You make them look great, and they're likely to promote the piece, and that makes them look even better. But then you have that benefit of people go, oh, that's interesting. Here's that brand. I've heard of them before. I don't know why. Maybe I read a trail article about them. And these types of things kind of compound, right? The many touch points that we live in. So.
Yeah, well, it sounds transactional, but it's not, because it's kind of one hand washing the other, right? This is granular, but if you're doing features on somebody, back to the SEO point we were talking about, you're giving them backlinks to their website, you're promoting their business to other people. And then on the flip side, they'll share it. Like if you profile a CEO who likely has other CEOs in their network, you profile them, they share that with their network because people love to be featured. And all of a sudden you might be in front of a whole bunch of other CEOs that, might not have had access to otherwise.
Yeah.
So the shareability piece is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think not the biggest thing, but one of the biggest things here is that blog content helps inform a lot of other marketing functions, particularly content marketing functions, but blog content can be repurposed for sales materials. It can be put into email. You can chop it up into social media content, all those kind of things. And again, distribution is a rabbit hole that's probably best left for another episode, but I will touch on it a little bit later in this episode.
Well, I love that last point you said about the sales process. And if for example, if you're talking to someone and you're like, here's an example of how you can have maybe 2 offices, and then you can, when you have those summer interns or you have extra staff, you can have them work in the co-working and dedicated desks. So like examples of flexible arrangements that may work for you on a leaner budget. And like, if that's the common scenario you're finding, you having an article to go along with what you just mentioned is a really great sales tool. So a framework, I guess you could look at is saying, what do we need to do to educate people at every stage of the buyer's journey where they've never heard of you before? And the article is, have you ever heard of WeWork? Which is not the article title, but that kind of concept. Yeah. And if not, like, here's what we are and here's what we do. So the category benefits, the local benefits and the local stuff, and different use cases and case studies and all the different things, like assets that you can use. So they're educated no matter what stage, or even if they're a member, how to get the most out of your co-working space, or, 5 ways to meet more people, in your office or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. That value is huge. And I think to your point, just like that ties into the shareability piece too, right? Like you're doing case studies that can inform the sales process. Maybe your team is having a conversation with somebody for X tier of membership, and you say, hey, check out this case study that we wrote about, how this member was able to get more productivity or save money and have their team, distributed, or, whatever it is. They could have a satellite office for a team in DC, but they're based in wherever they're based, that kind of thing. So you're able to show real world examples of how people get value from the space. They might share that, and it all kind of ties together.
Or you just use it in conversation with a salesperson. You say like, your sales team or you, the owner or whatever, say, let me just send you an article that explains this a little deeper and here's what you can do. And I don't know. There's lots of great ways that blogs can be useful sales assets. Like you mentioned, member onboarding emails, sales process, sales automations, like we talked about in episode something, maybe 6,
7. Now that we're recording in advance, I'm
seven. We have
7.
We just have to look at the sidebar of our notes and we'll find it there. But yeah, number 7. So you have sales and marketing automations that you can link to. Lots of great stuff. So I think in terms of each blog post is an asset, and how do we use that to educate prospects in all the different ways across the whole buying cycle, but also just like this is worth investing in to make it really good so that either it has the intended benefit, I guess is the thing. It's an asset.
Yeah, and this might be counterintuitive, but for me, I have like a weird thing with the term blogging. To me, I don't know why I've never liked saying like we're blogging, but I think that nobody thinks
like
about
the cat blogger days of early 2000s or late 1990s.
Yeah, like a music critic blogger or something.
Yeah,
but like with blogging, like it seems like a really basic kind of like turnkey thing. But I think when you start to think about all the things you can do with it and all the ways that you can leverage that content, create one asset and turn it into a few others and, leverage it for other purposes, and it actually starts to, you start to see the value that it carries. And so, yeah, the next point I wanted to cover here is just a little bit of strategy, talking about, is it still relevant in 2025? Yes, it is. But with AI, you don't just want to be doing anything or just doing things just to do things. You want to have kind of a rhyme and reason for why you're doing that. So, every strategy is unique. You can't just copy and paste one, but there are a few things that you can think about when you're starting to kind of wrap your head around what that strategy will be. The first one is just looking at what you want to achieve. Going back to the reasons why we have a blog, like, do you want to earn trust, build credibility? Do you want to educate people? Do you want some SEO traffic coming in? Do you want to profile your members and get shareability? It can be any and all of those things to an extent. But understanding first and foremost, like, why are we doing this? We're not just going to write a blog. We're understanding, what are we doing and why are we doing it and who is it for? So understanding your audience is really important as well. I typically, we look at who the current or ideal members are in a space, try to create content for them, look at the kinds of challenges they're trying to solve. What keeps somebody awake at night and how can you be a source that provides a solution that helps them get through it? What do they want to know? What are their aspirations, both personally and professionally? Also, desires versus motivations. This is a concept that I like to talk about with people a lot. Desires are kind of what people want, but motivations are why they want it. So like if you're a co-working space, somebody's desire might be to have a more successful business, but why do they want to have a more successful business? So that they can, provide for their family, they can do whatever it might be. Or, their desire might be to work closer to home and not have to commute into the city.
Or feel
why
less
do they
lonely or build team morale or hire great people. Yeah,
exactly. So it's not just looking at the thing that they want, it's looking at the reasons why they want it and tapping into that. So don't just look at desires, look at motivations in people. And even just things like co-working questions, comments, concerns, objections that you might get from tour bookings or, potential members or leads or whatever it might be. Those things can all kind of help you paint a picture of who your audience should be and what you should create for them based on the goals that you're trying to achieve.
Right. I think that last part is super critical as well, the goals part, because if you want your blog post to be an asset is something that produces value for you or can produce value for you over time long after you've created it. It's a tool that creates value as opposed to being a liability that takes value. And so it's almost like, your goal, knowing from the onset what you want to achieve with it and then working backwards into, well, who should be the reader and how can we, enable, how do we back into that goal from the reader's point of view? Because ultimately that's what it's about. So
yeah,
strategy. It's almost like you got to do a bit to get a result that you want. But you got to
reverse engineer.
Yeah.
If you want some corporate jargon, reverse engineer from the goals, figure out who the audience is.
Yeah, synthesize and prioritize.
Yeah, and center. We like to be centered. Another question I get a lot as far as blogging goes is frequency. So, all right, I'm kickstarting a blog for the co-working space. How often do I need to do this? And I would always just say, I think I stole this from you too, but consistency and potency are key elements of
Frequency
good content.
and potency. Yeah.
Frequency and potency. Yeah. So consistency wise, I think, how often can you do it without sacrificing quality? Like if you can do 4 articles a month that are lower quality or 2 articles a month that are high quality, start with 2, get your processes dialed in, make sure you're focusing on content, on quality. Don't just put out content for the sake of doing it. And then if you are able to, then scale up from there. So there's no real like right or wrong answer to it. I would say probably at least twice a month, but don't sacrifice quality for quantity.
Yeah. I think if you were doing like social media and you were running a blog and you had lots of newsletters and you had, like a very engaged kind of community and content schedule, then you can go for higher frequency if you wanted to, because you're just like, our plan is to show up every day. It's when you're in the middle zone where you're not quite showing up every day or even every week and your content's not like that, like impactful, that you have this like worst of both worlds. So the frequency potency trade-off is you can show up often, but you don't have to go hit a home run. You don't have to like make it epic content every single time. Your priority is getting in front of people often to create those exposures and relationships and brand impressions, and to add value still, obviously. Or you can show up less frequently, but then every time you do show up, you have something real to say. You go deeper on a topic. You make someone look amazing. Maybe you take really great photos of the person you're featuring so that they look and feel amazing in their blog article. And you've asked great questions and it's very dialed in. And so to your point, you're probably not going to come out the gate with high frequency. So you may as well start with higher potency, higher quality, make it as great as it can be, and then think about other strategies after. Is that right?
Set the bar high for yourself, so that your level of execution is high out of the gate. Don't set a low bar and just keep pounding on with a low bar. Set a high bar, live up to it, and then as you feel confident that you're meeting that standard that you've set for yourself, then add things on.
Yeah, makes sense. I like it.
Yeah, and then some of the things that you were just talking about actually kind of fall into my 11 unbreakable rules of writing content. I think I have
I probably break about 5 of them, but I don't know which 5.
Yeah, I mean they're guidelines.
Depends on
the day. So the first rule is don't just use AI. This is a more recent addition to this rules. It used to be a nice round 10, which was great, and but now it
messed that up.
AI kind of came through.
Did AI give you this prompt, the number 11? Was that
no, this came from my own frustration and my own nerding out on blog posts and being like, this is bad. This is like, yeah. So don't just use AI. So this is a callback to one of our past episodes, to avoid me going down a rabbit hole here. But if you didn't listen to our episode 5 on AI, check that out, and listen to what we talked about in as far as the split between AI and human inputs. I said it's a 40-20-40 split in terms of 40% upfront work to get ready to use AI, 20% letting the AI work, and then 40% humanizing it. So when I talk about don't just use AI, that's what I'm talking about. Don't just dump a random prompt into ChatGPT, let it spit out an article, and then put it on your blog. It's not going to turn out the way you want it to. However, in episode 5, we did give away some basic prompt architecture that you can use to create
pretty
blog
advanced
content.
Prompt architecture, to be honest.
I guess it is. I tried to make it
for the layperson. I mean, if you've never done prompt architecture, then it's going to be much more symbolic of what a good series of prompts should be. Anyway, go back and get episode 5 and get over to coworking.marketing/resources to download those prompts. Sign up for the newsletter and you'll get all those prompts and our other resources.
Yeah, you can download the prompt architecture and you can download the blog course that we'll be adding to that. And then you can put those two things together and hopefully it'll give you a starting point or give you something that you can hand off to your team or whoever may be handling your blog content. But rule number 1, don't just use AI. Use it, but use it properly and don't just get it to churn out stuff for you.
Yeah, makes sense.
Rule number 2 is write for a specific person. So this comes back to your audience. When you're crafting blog content, it's really easy to try to do general content for anyone and everyone, but that really won't map to your strategy. If you've got your strategy laid out properly, you understand your goals, you've worked back to your audience, and you understand who it is that you're talking to, or maybe the types of people that you're talking to, craft content that speaks to one specific person. Don't try to make it appeal to everybody. Instead of doing that, do individual articles that speak to individual people. Think as if you're writing, like if you have a person in mind, like your ideal member, and write to them. Don't try to write to everybody. It'll miss the mark. You'll go too wide rather than deep, and nobody will care. To put it bluntly.
There's a good quote I heard before is like the deeply personal is the universal. So if you can figure out, like, think about literally who you want to read this. Think of one of your best members or whoever, or someone in the sales cycle that you think is great or whatever. You write for their very particular interests and needs. And that ends up being much more resonant with a wide variety of people versus trying to like figure out an average avatar of some person who's an amalgamation of 50 people who doesn't actually exist. The average person just doesn't exist. And then trying to create content for that person. So I would say, like, yeah, to your point, think of who you really want to reach, and people like them, and go very specific to their needs is much more interesting than a blurred version.
Yeah, absolutely. Make it specific, make it connect with people. And building on that specificity point, I like to say answer specific questions. Speaking of rabbit holes, especially in podcasts, it's easy to do this. We can go off on tangents and come back. But with a blog article, if you start to go off topic and go in 5 or 6 different directions, you're going to lose people's focus. You're going to lose their interest. You need to pick one question generally that you can answer, and you're going to answer it really well, really thoroughly, and with high quality. And then probably along the way, if you're crafting blog articles and you find yourself going like off track over here, and here's a topic that we should talk about, write it down and put it into another blog article, and then you can link the two, but keep your content really focused. I often see people who go with like really long form content that covers way too many things. For co-working purposes, I don't think you need to do that. Keep it specific, answer a question.
I love that. I've heard of there's something, I think it was Think Media on YouTube. They have what they call the ASK method, ASQ, which is answer specific questions. And that's, nice. There's whole books written on content marketing about, I think it's They Ask You Answer, or there's a few other kinds. And like, it's literally like, paying attention to people during the sales cycle or members or whoever, and paying attention to what specific kinds of questions they ask. And those become great blog content that when the next person comes along and asks that question, you can not only answer it, but also in the follow-up email, drop a link to that article that says, hey, by the way, just like we talked about, here's the more detail on this question you had. And then by doing that a few times, they go, wow, this company's not only thought of everything, they're really doing a great job of thoroughly answering my questions and helping me make a decision, that makes it, give me an informed decision, which is great. And a great experience for them.
Yeah. And that's a thing that I always try to, encourage clients to do, is like have a system in place with your team so that those little nuances and questions aren't missed, because not only can you, make sure that you're answering real questions from real people and really listening and paying attention, but you can also lighten the load of having to figure out what to write about if you're listening to people, right? A lot of the time, the members in your space, the people in for tours, they'll tell you what they want to hear. You just
their objections.
Or their objections,
well.
yeah. Objections are important, right? Like you can kind of preemptively overcome those before people even come in, or you can learn from them or whatever, but you can lighten the load of the legwork of being like, all right, what are we going to write about now? If you have a running list of things that you're hearing from real people, that's a great place to start.
And this is like a mini tangent because we're not talking about writing page copy, but it does let you take those questions, not only make a blog article about it, but also include it in FAQs or include it in the details of the service page, which especially the objections, like I have a dog. Am I going to be able to bring the dog to the space? Or, I have a team, what if I want to have more people come in on a certain day? Like you can get into the weeds on the page, which helps with conversions, especially with those objections where people are kind of struggling with concepts and beliefs that they may have. Yeah. And you can answer them right there. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if we should do an episode at some point on web copy.
Oh, 100%. Maybe. How to do it, process.
Yeah, how to do it, what to think about. We've got a pretty dialed in process. I'm sure I could share a couple of things for people to think about. But yeah, that's another topic for another day. But okay, rule number 4, be unconventional. Like the internet was saturated. The internet is content, as you say, but the internet was saturated with blog content long before AI ever came out. I don't have the stats in front of me. I think it's like in the billions of articles are written each year. And with AI, it's probably significantly more. Like if the internet was saturated with blog content before, it's oversaturated with blog content now. And a lot of it is just the same thoughts and things that are already out there. And there's nothing unique about it. And especially with AI, another cautionary tale with AI that I think we talked about in the episode, but AI can, unless you're giving it original material, like you've interviewed somebody and you're using their unique perspectives or thoughts, all AI can do is pull from things that already exist. So all you're really doing, if you're asking AI, like ChatGPT, to write you an article, is pulling pieces of other people's ideas and compiling them into your own
probabilistic answer, right? It's what is most likely to be the next word following the previous word. And then you basically have the most generic,
the most generic thing ever. Yeah, you couldn't get something more bland than that. So be unconventional, whether it's like a hot take on a current topic, some unique perspective that you have, something that's contrarian, something that's outside the box, whatever it might be. Take some time to make sure that you're being unconventional, because that's really the best way to get anything read these days. If your article looks just like the next article, then what motivation does anybody have to read yours over theirs or any of them at all?
Yeah, and a key mindset, by the way, we didn't talk about this early, but maybe we should have, is that everyone's busy, right? Stephen Pressfield has a book, Nobody Wants to Read Your SH1T, and it's a great book about writing, and it basically allows you to empathize with a very busy reader. And so if you're writing conventional content that's like, I literally learned nothing here, they're going to tune you out next time. That's, so you've kind of lost their trust maybe permanently. And so knowing that everyone's super busy, you're like, how do I make something that actually precisely adds value, not to everyone, but to a very small and specific group of people, to one specific intended audience? And thinking small, I find, is the thing that opens it up. But the only way you can get people to actually want to read stuff when they're so busy is it's got to be interesting, valuable, and answer their questions.
Yeah, which is equal parts art and science, and it's not always easy to do, but that comes back to your audience and knowing what they're looking for, and then creating something unique for them.
Yeah. And by the way, just one other additional thought, like sometimes it's not even about getting them to read your content. Sometimes it's about having stuff that like they see on social media that seems interesting or positions you just at the headline. Like we went through this whole social media age where you couldn't even retweet or reshare a post on social media without being like, hey, I noticed you didn't click the link. Are you sure you want to share this? Like it became a feature, I think, on Twitter or something back in the day.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of in this world where people don't even have to read the thing to get the message. And sometimes like the headline and the hook and the story is enough to get people to resonate, to maybe share something, right? Like it.
Yeah.
So, and just even your presence, showing up on social media to share stuff or in a newsletter, sometimes is enough to just do a job, even though that doesn't show up anywhere in the data.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. So trying not to go off on another counter tangent here, but like the way we look at content generally is that every word and every line in every article you write, its job is to get people to read the next line until they get to your call to action, which is another rule. But the job of every word you write and every sentence you write is to get people to read the next one. And I didn't go into it here because it's a bigger kind of dive, but in the course that I'll be adding up there for you to download, I do dive into all those technical details. I think there's a section called How to Write Headlines That Grab Readers by the Eyeballs or something like that.
David Ogilvy said 80 cents of every dollar is spent on your headline back in the ad days.
Yeah.
When you actually put in print these articles and you paid for them, advertorials. Most people would if you're lucky, read the headline, and 80% of them would bounce from there. So your titles and headlines are so important.
And that's somewhere that's so easy to get lazy, I find too. Like I always, when I'm working with writers, it's like, give me 5 options that are completely varied. Yeah, but it should, like, the process is different for everybody, but you create the content, you flesh out the idea, and then you should go back to your headline,
your original headline,
and write it 5 different ways, because it'll iterate and it'll evolve based on what you've created. But your headline is so important because it's the first thing people see, and if it doesn't,
might be the only thing they see.
Yeah, if it doesn't grab them by the eyeballs, they're not doing anything.
Same with intros. A lot of times the intros are too. I mean, like our intros for this podcast, they just kind of wander, and people are like, wait, am I listening to a business podcast or am I just eavesdropping on a conversation?
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Yeah. So like intros too, like sometimes I'll say, write the intro and do your whole article, and then just like literally cut the intro and basically get into the good the goods, right?
Yeah. People love, well, not
throat
people,
clearing.
I'm generalizing, but a lot of people I think feel like, a lot of writers often feel like saying so much in the intro is like you're giving them a story and a preamble to get people in. And when you're thinking about people being busy, like you got 4 minutes for someone to read your article through, probably, if you're lucky.
You may have less than 1 minute statistically.
Yeah, and if your headline does its job and gets people to the intro needs to do its job quickly to get people to the meat and potatoes of the I want analogies. The meat and potatoes is not an analogy, but I'm going to work on these because it sounds so cool when you do it. And I just feel like I don't have enough locked and loaded, but I will.
You will.
I will. And so to kind of help people with the unconventional nature, or to kind of guide you with a framework of what kind of blog content to create, I have an article on this on my blog, which I can share. But the 4 E's framework, basically, if you're trying to think of buckets that you can, put your content into, educate, engage, entertain, and empower. And I'm not going to get into this now because I break this down a little bit in the next section that I've got here, but bookmark that for a minute. 4 E's: educate, engage, entertain, empower. Those are generally the things that you want to aim to do with blog content. This, I think, is like the golden rule here. Only publish it if you'd want to read it. So, like if you're writing content, take yourself out of the shoes of the producer of the content and think about it objectively. Like if you saw this in the wild, would you read it? And if you wouldn't, don't publish it.
Yeah, a lot of people write for other people and they're like, I would never read this, but someone will. And it's hard when you're not writing for like literally yourself, but yeah.
You got to be a little bit objective and like put it through that stress test. Like, all right, is it unconventional? Is the headline good? Is it unique? If I saw this, would I click on it? Or like if I'm the audience, would I? So always try to write things that you would find interesting to read. If you don't think you've hit that mark, or that your audience would like to read, if you haven't hit that mark, just sit with it and give it a little more time. Next one here, this is a little more granular, but kind of feeds into what we were talking about before and how much time people do or do not have. Make your content skimmable, using headlines and like headers in your article to break things up in small little paragraphs and simple words and
bullets and numbers,
and bullets,
lists. Yeah,
you want to be able to create content that if somebody's busy and they get on your article, they can skim through, see a header, see a bullet point list, digest the information in half the time it would take to read it, find what they like, skip what they don't, and get the value that they're looking for.
That's how people, a lot of times they do go down the whole page, read the headings, and then decide if they want to go back and read it. So you have this thing, I've seen it live. I've used like site visitor recorders that show people
like the heat maps,
scrolling to the bottom, and then like literally videos like of clicks and how people read articles. And it's wild how we just bounce up and down and kind of grab bits and pieces of content unless it's dense, and then the content better be really, really good if it's just dense like a book, because a lot of people just don't read that way. They're busy and they're on screens. It's not the same as a book. So
I think I also have an article on my blog that I'll put in the show notes. I want to remind myself to put a couple in here that are relevant for this, but it's about skimming, and it's kind of like the way that people skim content with some scientific backing that isn't mine, but that I found interesting. And it's for blogs and emails. So I'll put that up there too. Because it's interesting to see how people actually consume the content that you create. And to that point, keep it concise is the next rule. Keep it concise, keep it skimmable. You don't need to write an essay. This isn't, you're not like submitting your content to a
journal. Minimum word count or maximum word count.
No, and don't fluff it up because you don't need to. You're not writing for the Journal of Medicine, and you need to have.
You're not paid by the word.
Yeah, no. And if you're hiring a writer, my advice is never pay by the word. Pay by the project.
Well, here's a question for you: how long should content be?
It's like the question's like how long is a string, because it really depends on the topic and the content. I see a lot of people who think that like 1,000 to 1,200 words is like, that's the gold standard. That's the minimum. But to me, it's, why would you go for 1,200 words if you can say the same and deliver the same message and value in 500 words? I don't think it's about length. I think you shouldn't be thinking about content as far as length goes. Like you probably don't need to do 3,000 words. Think of it as how can you deliver the maximum value and the maximum impact in the least amount of words so that you can make sure that people can consume it in their busy schedules and you're not losing people.
Yeah. I think what I've said before is like, it's as long as it needs to be good and no longer, and to convey the value. And that may be a 3,000 word piece, or it could be a 30 word piece. Kat Johnson has a great book, and most of the chapters are just very short, succinct, little bite-sized pieces, but each one of those ideas are complete and valuable in and of itself. Right. So, if you haven't read that one, I think it's called The Daily Co, if I'm not mistaken. By Kat Johnson, an industry maven. But yeah, so I think that's a good mindset, is because like, how else would you know? Should we be doing long? Should we be doing short? Like, what's the deal? And
having a good editing process is really important. And sometimes if you're the one creating the content, editing your own work is not super easy because you get attached to it. So having maybe an editor or someone who can give it a second set of eyes to make sure that, you're not fluffing it up, you're not going too long, you're not rambling on, is typically a good thing to do. Maybe I should have an editor for my speaking on this podcast.
Oh, yeah, we're too far gone for that now.
No, it's a lot of rambling. I'll just tell I'll get Riverside, the platform we use, to take out every third word.
Yeah.
Probably get the same point across.
Yeah, I agree. Every third
and then,
point.
Yeah. So rule number 9, by the way, is be conversational. This is something that I really like. I think, it depends. There's scale. Conversational nature is a scale. I think, your tone and your voice kind of are different than your conversational nature. For me, if you're more corporate space, maybe you're writing a little bit more formally. If you're more of like a creative space, then you're probably writing a little bit more, the wording's going to be different, but being conversational keeps people engaged. I like to, if we're writing content, I like to break it up with a question so that you get people to ask themselves a question and then you answer it. Just doing little things like that keep people involved. I think that's, why podcasts are so big, is because people like to feel like they're involved in a bit of a conversation, not just reading a one-way blast of content at you. So adapt your tone and your voice, but I like to see conversational content. I just find that people engage with it more so than things that are really rigid and feel like you're just getting talked at.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yep. 10, always include a call to action. This should go without saying, but often it doesn't happen. Whatever you're writing, make sure that you have a relevant call to action in there, and make sure that you have a reasonable call to action. That's one thing that I see quite often, is like somebody will, a space will write an article that's kind of like a middle of funnel article that's kind of, general interest. And then the call to action will be like, sign up for a private office today. And I'm like, no. Right? Like, nobody's going to read one article on a kind of peripheral topic and then buy an office, but they probably will, if they like it, contact you or subscribe to your newsletter, or
get a day pass,
book a tour, something, some sort of low barrier call to action. And that kind of comes down to understanding. I don't want to get too far into the marketing funnel here, but it comes down to understanding where that reader is at in their journey, and what the content entails. But make your calls to action realistic and reasonable. Don't ask someone for the world when you've given them, just a little bit of
it might even be like, learn more about our private offices or our co-working memberships or our meeting rooms. If it's kind of tangentially related to the piece, you might be like, go learn more over here, and click them to that page, and just so they're more aware of what the service is all about or whatever. Yeah.
And I think you mentioned linking service pages in the article before, and that's a great way to get people, organically, like sneak organic links in there, so that if people are curious about, you're talking about a private office, you can link to your private office page. It's no pressure, but it's there for you if you're interested.
Yeah.
So
it tells Google those pages are more valuable because you've got 30, 50, 100 links internally on your website pointing to those pages. So there's more paths for the Google robots or AI robots now to go in and do these things, as well as more signals that that's an important page, because there's lots of high value pages linking to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say maybe those are super soft calls to action, but they're not. They're more of like the self-serve, like making sure there's self-serve information available and easy to access. And then the last one is distribute. So this is a topic for another day. As I said, I think this is an episode unto itself. But when we talk what
does distribute mean?
Well, so if we're talking about whether blog content is worth it in 2025, it's still relevant. It is, but it can't be, I always say that writing and publishing an article is like 20% of the process. Like, once you've written and published your article, that's only 20% of the work. If you just put an article on your blog and just leave it there, you have basically cut it off at the knees in terms of its potential impact. Distribution means, how can you take that content, and actually I'm jumping down because I have a section on it here, but how can you take that one asset and turn that into 10 other assets? How can you take that blog article that you've written, turn it into an email? Maybe it's a standalone email. Maybe it's part of your email newsletter, social media, turning it into video and audio versions. I have a video that I did a couple weeks ago where I basically did exactly that. I recorded a video I think it was on the topic of distribution, actually, ironically enough.
Meta.
so meta. But I went through the process of like, okay, how do you take that one video, turn that into a blog post, embed the video in the blog post, take the blog post, put it on LinkedIn, put it in a LinkedIn newsletter, send it out to the email list, put it on social media, even though my Instagram following is absolutely pitiful. But the point being is the mindset, and it's going to be different depending on what you're using within your marketing mix, what tools you have, but making sure that, once you write an article and it's a great article, you're not just leaving it there to die. You're finding as many ways as you possibly can to amplify it. If you featured somebody, getting proactive and making sure that they're sharing it too. Not just being like, here's your live link, hope you like it, but saying, please share this with your network. So making sure that however you're doing it, take that piece of content and make it go in as many directions as you possibly can, so that you're creating as many opportunities as you can for people to bump into it.
Love that. Yep.
Yeah.
Playing traffic.
Playing traffic, and then eventually you'll get lucky. And then
the luck mobile.
I'd love to get hit by the luck mobile, man.
You're just not aware of it right now.
You're right.
You've gotten hit by the luck bus.
I have been hit by the luck bus.
Yeah. I mean, look at you.
It's a bigger bus than anybody of my intellect and skill set should ever have been hit by. Alas, here we are.
You got to appreciate what you got, my friend. You got to appreciate what you got.
You do. On that note, you told me about a book called The Gain and the Gap. If you want to appreciate what you got, read The Gap and the Gain. Read The Gap and the Gain. If you want to be conscious of how much of a luck bust you've been hit by, that's a good book to read. Anyways.
It is. I forgot I read that book. Yeah.
It's good.
And maybe I just recommended it to you.
You probably did. Probably just like, hey, this looked cool.
Yeah, I did read it. It's true.
Or maybe I was complaining about something to you and you just went like, hey, why don't you just take this and read it and leave me alone?
Dan Sullivan's a great author. If you want to have exponential mindset shifts, he's down to earth. It's not like woo woo or anything. It's just, another book is Who Not How. Anyway, great book. Yeah.
Sorry, that has nothing to do with the topic at hand. But
it's distribution, right? Getting hit by the luck mobile.
Yeah, there you go.
The luck bus.
I like it. Okay, so I jumped down to distribution, which I've covered that off. Great. Okay, so topic ideation. Obviously, like, you've got your strategy in place. You understand high level what you should and shouldn't be doing with your content. The hardest thing is figuring out what topics to write about for a co-working space. And again, it's a tough one to give rock solid advice on, because ultimately every co-working space is slightly different. The community is different that's in there. The brand is different, all those kind of things. So your strategy will really inform the topics that you pick. But coming back to that 4 E's framework that I mentioned, I think that's kind of like the easiest way to put this into 4 buckets. So educate people about co-working. As we said, the industry is new. Most people, well, not most, but a lot of people won't be familiar with it. You can educate people about your space, your services, the members that are in your space, how it works. You can entertain people. This takes a little bit more of like a finger on the pulse, I find, like keeping up with current trends and things that are happening in the world and chiming in on relevant, conversations or topics that are out there. But if you're able to keep up with that, content that entertains people is great. You can do interactive content. You can do like day in the life sort of write-ups, fun takes on work and life, things that tie into your brand. Again, it's really hard to give you like a rock solid recommendation. But think about what people will find entertaining, what your audience will be entertained by.
I feel like the best North Star is thinking about a real person you want to write to, whether they're in your sales funnel or they're an ideal member, or maybe they're not even aware of you, but you had a conversation. You're like, hey, have you heard of WeWork? And that's kind of what we do. And just thinking about literally a person you wrote, and maybe even a conversation, a person or have met or experienced in the whole interaction of day-to-day business, and really precisely writing for them. I feel like that's the best way. The ideas are much more obvious when you're like, here's someone who's on the fence. Here's how we can create something that really bridges the gap for them. Or here's someone who's like an award-winning client. Here's how we really speak to them so that they feel seen and heard. That's like my method. So I think your points about educating, entertaining, engaging, empowering are great. Yeah. And, precision. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'll blast through this, but like engage. I think personal stories are really good. It's a personal industry. The experience is personal. Being in a workspace is personal. The people you're surrounded with are personal. Don't be afraid to lean into that. And your brand is your brand. You are a reflection of your brand. If you're writing on behalf of yourself, don't be afraid to throw some hot takes out there. Don't be afraid to be personable. Going back to the list here, episode 4, when we talked about should your CEO be involved in marketing. Don't be afraid to put them out there a little bit as well.
Or
people find that
if you are the CEO.
Or you, if you're the CEO, yeah, and empowering people. This is a slippery slope. I find that there's if you're not careful with the empowering stuff, you could end up with like a generic Forbes or entrepreneur type.
What do you
article.
mean by empower?
So things that like tools that you would recommend, how-tos, best practices, considerations, like things that people can use in their business. So I look at this as like, how can you provide value beyond a membership? And that's, part of that is turning into a resource that's actually value driven for people, for your members or for non-members who might come across, your blog. But I feel like empowering kind of really falls into this. What can you do to support people? What can you do? We talked earlier about what keeps people awake at night. What are their aspirations? What are their goals? What, all those things. Like, how can you create content that actually empowers them it's almost supporting your goal of, helping them work better by providing a better workspace.
Or even related service. It could be like, here's our top 10 recommended bookkeepers and accountants, and or maybe you want to be careful about recommendations like that, but making it easy, like job boards, classifieds. Like there's probably all kinds of resources you could do, or events that are happening, or discounts to local businesses or things,
partners that you have maybe in the neighborhood. But to that point, you talked about like best local accountants. You don't necessarily have to do the best local accountants, but you could do something on, 5 small business tips from a local accountant who's a member of your space. And you're and then you can connect those people with that person if they want to learn more. So anything that you can do to be a resource, a value add for your members or non-members or prospects or whatever. But I would just say it can be a slippery slope, not to hate on Entrepreneur or Forbes or any of those. But I find that a lot of the time they rank really highly. They're huge blogs, but the content can sometimes be a little bit vanilla.
It's content mill. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're creating vanilla content, you're never going to compete with them. So think about unique stuff.
I think the value is in specificity and not trying to cast that wide net, but really thinking really granular about your customer, whether it's an enterprise customer or a small business or a soloist or an entrepreneur, like whoever it is. It's small is better than the Forbes style generic content.
100% agree. And so the last thing I had here, and this is another rabbit hole, I don't want to go down it too far, but measurement. So how can you check whether your content is actually performing well? Again, this takes time, but Google Analytics is a great place to start. You can check the traffic that your articles are getting. If it's set up properly, you can kind of track the conversion trail from, did somebody land on your homepage and end up on a blog article? And then did they submit a newsletter form, or did they submit a contact form from there? So just keeping an eye on the volume of traffic that you're getting and then what that traffic is doing once they get there. You can also look at social shares and comments. If you're distributing on social media, are people engaging with it? Do they seem to like it? If you're sending it out in email, are people opening your emails? Are they clicking on it, or are they unsubscribing because maybe it's not what they're looking for? So dive into that a little bit more in the course that I'll be sharing. It's a whole other technical rabbit hole, but just some high level stuff that you can keep in mind to temperature check.
And where do you find that course again, Taylor? And the KPI dashboard, the one I use with my clients for multi-location, and a business marketing all-in-one organizational system to keep all that stuff organized, and a few other resources. We put every resource we have into this place. So when you opt in on the email list, you'll get a document that you can reference forever. Yeah. And get access to all that stuff.
Give me an eye glaze check. How glazed over were you? I know we're coming up on our target of 60 minutes.
Not glazed at all. Crystal clear, baby. Crystal clear.
I love it. Okay. Awesome. Then we're coming up on our 60 minutes here. I'm going to let you run people out of this because you're so much better at it now than I am.
Well, I'll just leave it at you've heard the website. I'm trying to push the YouTube channel because I think there's not enough. We have like 5 people over there, but we're getting more views over there. So definitely check out YouTube at Coworking Marketing. My name is Kevin Whelan. I'm a marketing consultant for coworking operators, everspaces.com, and Taylor is at tailmaker.ca, the content marketing wizard for coworking operations. And he's doing a lot these days. He's the powerhouse powering this content engine for this podcast. So he's the one distributing all of it. He's publishing everything on LinkedIn. He's doing all the notes. So kudos to Taylor and Tailmaker for making all this happen. I guess we'll leave it there for now, my friend.
Yes, sir. Thanks
you
as always. All right.